The Edge of Fate released 8 weeks ago, so now's a good time to look back on the launch of Destiny 2's latest main expansion and see how players are enjoying the game and all the new and improved systems Bungie brought to the table. At least it would be if anyone was actually still playing. Things are pretty rough out there. Okay, I'm mostly joking, but community sentiment is without a doubt the worst I've seen since Destiny 2's troubled first year back in 2017. So, what happened, why are players pissed, and is it even possible to come back from this when so much of the game we knew and loved up until 2 months ago is almost unrecognisable? I've been playing this series for 11 years across both flagship games, so I've been there for all the ups and downs you'd expect from any live service game running that long. Sure, there have been occasional content droughts, some expansions have been better than others, and filler seasonal content has missed the mark more often than not. But overall, for dedicated players like myself, we stick with it through the bumps, Bungie makes some changes here and there, and it all evens out over time. But there will always be players for whom something along the way is their personal final straw. For many years under every official Destiny 2 tweet, you'd find replies saying "dead game," and there's been a long-time community meme of the next upcoming expansion being make or break, poking fun at players who can't help but doom about every little thing. But with player counts plummeting this soon after a major expansion, and subreddits and socials being almost wall-to-wall criticism, I think there's a chance the haters might be right this time. First, a quick overview on what the game used to be like before Edge of Fate launched to give some context. Destiny 2 is a looter-shooter first-person MMO, although I use that term lightly. Travel around a futuristic solar system, exploring both alien and earthly sci-fi architecture, shooting laser guns and wielding space magic abilities in the noble pursuit of acquiring fancy new hats while a number goes up. But despite that stupid description, it is very fun to play moment to moment. Bungie obviously knows how to make a good FPS. With a range of different classes, customizable subclasses, and weapons, armor, and abilities that strongly affect playstyle, build crafting was a deep and rewarding core part of the game. Players could chase a variety of activity-specific items with random rolls, raising overall power level as well as perfecting specific loadouts. And experienced players challenged themselves in endgame dungeon and raid PvE content, or casual and competitive PvP modes, getting even better rewards in the process. Across social spaces, casual playlists, and patrol modes on each planet, you'd encounter random guardians out in the wild, teaming up for impromptu public events or dance parties, so the universe often felt populated. And within the last few years, Bungie even added an excellent in-game group finder tool for more difficult activities which don't matchmake by default. Sure, no player is ever going to be 100% happy, and there are always going to be things to improve on, but the story campaigns were consistently fairly good, the raids and dungeons rarely disappointed, and the music was always exceptional. Plus, cool new one-off missions with exotic rewards would sporadically drop, giving fresh new things to chase throughout the year, and in the last few years we've had access to weapon crafting, where some items could become unlocked to forge perfect god rolls ourselves, helping to balance out the grind and unforgiving RNG of a purely random system. And even the power grind each season became significantly reduced, as Bungie recognised players wanted to just get into playing the new content faster, rather than engaging in an arbitrary number grind, which was a very well received change overall. But there were a few major criticisms of the pre-Edge of Fate era which I feel I should mention. The first year of Destiny 2 in 2017 had fixed roles on loot, subclasses had minimal customization, and expansion content was thin, so the game felt like a big downgrade compared to the final year of Destiny 1 which players had just come off the back of. Then came the introduction of the Destiny Content Vault, or DCV, in 2020, probably Bungie's greatest sin in the eyes of the community even to this day, where entire campaigns, raids, planets, strikes and maps were completely removed from the game and are still not playable now. This was paid content from major yearly expansions, not just seasonal filler which is expected to come and go. Much of it was popular, and the reasons given for throwing it in the bin was to keep the game's file size down and also reduce the quantity of older content that would have to be checked and updated each time Bungie changed the engine. But players didn't much care for either of these excuses. Bungie later announced they will not be removing any more campaigns going forward, but a lot of damage was already done, not just to the available in-game content, but also to player trust. And then there was sunsetting, brought in at the same time as the DCV in late 2020, where all weapons and armour released 1 year ago or earlier would have its power level frozen and could not be brought up to current levels, meaning it couldn't be used in the newest high-level content without bringing your average power down and turning any weapon into an ineffective pea shooter. The plan was for an additional wave of sunsetting to occur every 3 months with the launch of each new season, freezing gear that came out the year before. But sunsetting was so monumentally unpopular that Bungie almost immediately cancelled those plans. Gear that had already been sunset in the first wave would remain so, but they wouldn't sunset anything else going forward. When the core of the game is a looter, players were incredibly invested in the gear they had already acquired, some of which came from overcoming difficult challenges, others at the end of a lengthy grind, or even just for sentimental value. Faced with the prospect of every new piece of loot coming stamped with an expiry date only 1 year later, it made players question why they'd bother chasing anything in the first place if they were regularly forced to replace it rather than just because they wanted to as their builds naturally evolved over time. You might call us hoarders, but over many years lovingly curating our characters and builds, it's natural we feel a connection to all that gear we've collected. And thankfully, given how universal the outcry was against sunsetting in 2020, and Bungie's rapid U-turn to cancel it, it was safe to assume they wouldn't try to do something like that again in the future.
Foreshadowing is a literary device in
which brings us to the Edge of Fate, the first expansion in a brand new saga of Destiny's storyline, following the final shape in 2024 where we defeated the Witness, the ultimate big bad of the previous 10 years. Edge of Fate promised the largest and most sweeping changes to leveling, weapons, armor, stats and abilities that we've ever seen all at once, but things didn't start off great. Aside from a cutscene revealing new lore details about Ikora, a beloved NPC's backstory, and a fun final mission where we finally got to see what one of the mysterious cosmic entities known as the Nine actually looked like, the campaign was boring and repetitive. The new destination Kepler had been touted by Bungie as taking influence from Metroidvanias, but these elements turned out to be very simple lock and key style environmental interactions, with only one of the tools even becoming part of our Guardian's permanent kit once the campaign was over. The rest always just somewhere nearby in the room every time you needed it to get through a barrier. The world design, normally one of Bungie's strongest features, was this time drab, samey and uninspiring, and the world felt empty, devoid of any other Guardians running around, as for the second expansion in a row, the new location had no background matchmaking while exploring in patrol mode, which is not very MMO now, is it? What is very MMO, however, is that power leveling became more important again, with Kepler featuring world tiers at higher levels containing more challenging enemies and modifiers, with much better rewards for the trouble. But what does better rewards mean? New weapons and armor now fall into a tier system, 1 to 5. For armor, higher tier means higher stat totals and larger spikes on specific stats. Previously, the maximum for any stat was 100, giving faster ability cooldown, but now every stat goes up to 200, with points above 100 directly increasing the damage those abilities deal. For weapons, higher tiers bring enhanced perks, multiple perk choices for better odds at a god roll, and even enhanced mods and origin traits at the highest tiers. For comparison, the best weapons and armor it was possible to get pre-Edge of Fate are roughly equivalent to Tier 3, so Tier 4s and 5s are a huge benefit to our builds now, and our characters can be significantly more powerful, especially with the 200 stat changes. And in general, players are big fans of this loot in isolation. The problems come down to how it's acquired, restrictions in build crafting associated with it, and how long it will last for. So, how do you get Tier 4 or 5 gear? Does it come from overcoming the most challenging activities in the game, like existing master difficulty raids or dungeons, maybe performing well in Trials of Osiris, the pinnacle PvP mode, or perhaps even just normal completions of the new Desert Perpetual raid, the hardest raid Bungie has ever made, where for the first time, every single one of its 4 encounters is a boss with high mechanical complexity and large health pools? I'd forgive you for thinking that, but no, you just have to be 400 power or above. No matter how difficult the activity you're playing is, if you're lower power, your rewards will be lower tier. Just jumping in quickly to say that while I was putting the finishing touches to this video, Bungie announced some small upcoming patch notes, which will slightly change some of the things I'm about to explain next in this video. I've added a section at the end covering those upcoming changes, but I've left the rest of the video as it was because these issues are still how the live game functions right now, and are a big part of the reasons why so many players have been unhappy since Edge of Fate launched, so it's still worth explaining them now. So where do you gain power? The story campaign will get you to level 200, which then becomes the limit for loot drops across the wider game, with everything above 200 classed as seasonal power, which only drops from the end of activities within the brand new portal, a menu containing a variety of repeatable activities from throughout the game's history, given a score-based system and featuring customizable difficulty modifiers to boost reward score higher. Each activity gives a small boost to power, so after a few of these, your average goes up and the next few drops are even higher, and repeat. For each of these, there's a 5% chance it will drop as a prime, with an even higher power increase and one tier quality above what you'd normally get, which is a nice bonus, but you can't really rely on them for farming high tier consistently, and this grind to 400 takes a long time. At 400, drops become tier 4, but now none of these increase power. The only increase comes from primes, which again is a 1 in 20 chance, and you need 2 or 3 of them to increase your average. So this final power band can take well over 100 hours of playtime just on its own before you can get tier 5s consistently at 450. It's taken full-time, professional Destiny 2 players multiple weeks to hit 450, so you can't blame the rest of the player base for taking one look at this system and reassessing their relationship with the game. Everything that isn't in the portal, all the old raids, dungeons, strikes, Gambit, Crucible, Lost Sectors, missions, all that huge variety of legacy content in the game does not increase power and does not reward tiered weapons or armor that can get above 100 stat points, so are functionally completely worthless content now. And even activities that are in the portal are effectively not worth farming for specific items at all until you hit 400 power and are getting consistent tier 4s. Even the brand new raid, which requires you to unlock higher tiers, and even then you're only getting tier 3s with a small chance at tier 4s. Tier 5s are currently not possible to get at all from the new raid. The game now is effectively just speedrunning 1 or 2 of the fastest portal activities for hundreds of hours alone before we're allowed to start receiving any gear that is an improvement on the gear we had before. Bungie has also moved away from the crafting system, with no new weapons being craftable, so they have really doubled down on the grind this time. Destiny players are not averse to a grind though. Back in the day it took me 21 trials resets to finally get my god roll cataphract, but at least I was directly grinding for the thing I wanted, and any drop could have been the one. Now we're grinding for permission to much later get the good gear, and every drop along the way is completely disposable. And if you want to experiment with a different build or character, you have to infuse that build up to your maximum power to continue receiving the highest rewards, which requires a new seasonal currency, the cost of which are so high that we quickly run out. So most players just run exactly the same build on one character over and over for their entire leveling progress. Sounds great, right? Would you believe me if I said it gets worse? Because it gets worse. Alongside the high stats and enhanced perks of high-tiered loot I laid out earlier, this new gear also has additional benefits. Weapons deal increased damage across the board depending on tier, 2% for tier 1s up to 10% for tier 5s. There are dedicated damage perks in the game that only deal 10% increased damage, so giving that on top just for existing is pretty wild. Tiered armor similarly gives bonus damage resistance from all sources, 3% per tier 5 piece, up to a total of 15% for a full set. This is incredibly strong, so there's even more reason to chase new high tier gear, and it makes all of the previous gear we've acquired over the years even more redundant. Take the new Outrageous Fortune Rapid Fire Heavy Grenade Launcher for example. It can roll with Envious Arsenal and Bait and Switch, 2 of the best perks on a GL and the same as a previous god roll we got from the Vespers Host dungeon on the Versus Chill Inhibitor. Pre-Edge of Fate, these would do exactly the same damage as each other, but now, because this one is a new tier 4, it does 8% more damage, just because. Plus, there are seasonal weapon mods that can only be equipped on new gear, such as Temporal Blast, which builds up charges and does an absurd amount of additional damage on top, turning this new GL into an absolute monster. So my old Versus Chill god roll is completely left in the dust, even though it has exactly the same perks. Just weeks before Edge of Fate launched, a very popular dungeon event went live with refreshed loot and mechanics from a variety of classic dungeons. Players farmed for new god rolls to add to their collections, ready to use in future content. The event ran for 9 weeks, all the way up to the launch of the new expansion, and as soon as Edge of Fate went live, every single piece of this brand new loot immediately became redundant because of the new gear system. Exotics are not part of the tier system. Instead, Bungie has handpicked a selection of exotics to become featured and receive the same benefits of Tier 5 new gear. But what if your build uses non-featured exotics? Well, your weapon will be doing considerably less damage than if it was, and a non-featured armor piece that is crucial to your build or playstyle will lock you out of being able to enter activities that have the mandatory avant-garde modifier on them, where every equipped piece of gear must be new or featured. Oh yeah, that's a thing now too. Pre-Edge of Fate, one of the most popular PvE activities in the game were Grandmaster Nightfalls, challenging strikes for up to 3 people that rewarded some of the best weapons and valuable upgrade materials. These could be played repeatedly and each week offered a focus on a specific weapon for targeted farming, so most players ended up running a lot of GMs. These simply don't exist anymore. The nearest equivalents are conquests in the portal, and they all include the avant-garde modifier. So if you're running, say, a prismatic subclass with one of the powerful double perk exotic class items, you can't play conquests. You gotta equip something else. Simply because they aren't on the arbitrary list of featured exotics picked by Bungie. Oh, and each conquest can only be completed once. Not even once per character, once per account. Even if you join a friend who hasn't done one yet, it won't let you launch the activity if you have, which is frankly bizarre given they're supposed to be the replacement for GMs. And I'm not joking when I say it gets even worse, because as you might have guessed from their names, seasonal power, seasonal mods, and the new gear bonuses are all temporary. 6 months after the launch of Edge of Fate, and only 4 months from now, we'll be in Renegades, the Star Wars themed expansion. Yes, you heard that right, but I'm not getting into all that now. When Renegades launches, all this tiered loot we've spent hundreds of hours farming in Edge of Fate will no longer be new gear. It will lose bonus damage, bonus DR, and won't be able to equip seasonal mods, so it will be effectively left in the dust just like all our other old gear is currently. And this includes the power grind, as seasonal power will reset back to 200. So we'll need to grind power levels to eventually be allowed to receive higher tiers all over again. This is effectively sunsetting by another name, and is scheduled to occur every 6 months. It didn't work the first time Bungie tried it, and it's clearly not working now, so changes need to be made. But my fear is that it will take a long time to implement substantial improvements to all these different systems which have been so negatively received. Over the years, Bungie has built up a pretty good reputation for community engagement, with a weekly Destiny 2 newsletter and active socials, but a recent post detailing upcoming changes to Portal rewards, which would have made Portal power farming even grindier, was so badly received that they walked all those plans back within days. And the community is concerned because how could a post as tone-deaf as this even come out 6 weeks into Edge of Fate, when players have been very vocal with their criticisms since the expansion launched? Trust in Bungie is at an all-time low. So, Portal power, new gear bonuses, and seasonal expiry dates are the biggest issues pushing players away from the game right now, but there's still a wealth of other smaller issues that are piling up on top, so it's hard not to feel hopeless about the current state of the game. There is, overall, very little new content in Edge of Fate compared to previous expansions. Bungie previously stated it would be a smaller expansion, with the similarly sized Renegades coming halfway through the year, so combined should be equivalent to a traditional yearly release. But as Bungie have also got rid of seasons, we're already feeling the pinch when it comes to how shallow the content going into this year feels right now. The first year of Destiny 2, we had 3 new raids. The second year brought 3 new raids and a new dungeon. Then it dropped down to 1 new raid, 1 reprised raid from Destiny 1, and 2 new dungeons. Then it dropped again to 1 new raid and 2 new dungeons, ditching the reprised raid, even though Wrath of the Machine is still yet to be brought over. And now the roadmap for the entire year of Edge of Fate is only 1 new raid and 1 new dungeon. We didn't even get a new strike or any post-raid missions or changes to the world, which have been standard for years now. But on the other hand, we are getting consistent additions to the real money microtransaction cosmetic store, because of course we are. In a couple of weeks, the first ever Epic raid, a refreshed version of the recent Desert Perpetual, will launch, with Bungie promising changes to the original version, new loot, and even a new world-first race for it, with many players optimistic it will include a new encounter. But this has proved controversial, with many seeing this as a way to cynically stretch out the raid and cover up the overall lack of quantity of new content scheduled for this year. 4 members of the original Desert Perpetual World First Raid team have even announced a boycott of the Epic version to protest what they see as diminishing their World First achievement, and also the inclusion of a modifier that will disincentivize loadout swapping, something which is prevalent at the highest skill levels of the game. Technical issues have also plagued the expansion since launch. Exotics simply not working, announced stat changes not functioning as advertised, legacy endgame content breaking entirely and becoming uncompletable, and the new raid suffering server issues during its contest mode, with players losing their ability to sprint, fire their guns properly, or get ammo and super energy from rally flags, with teams constantly having to refresh the instance to continue. Plus, the difficulty was tuned so high in terms of boss health that it saw the lowest number of completions for a contest raid we've had in years, alienating even many highly skilled dedicated raiders who fall outside the top 0.1%. Outbreak Perfected, which has since become the meta for damage and super generation since contest ended, and Grand Overture, which according to one Bungie dev was very common in their raid damage testing, were both disabled due to unexpected bugs, as with only 4 days between expansion and raid launch, their teams didn't have time to fix them. And I really wanted to keep the focus of this video on how it feels to actually play right now, rather than behind the scenes gossip or drama, but I can't not draw attention to the multiple waves of layoffs that have happened at Bungie in the last few years, with an article in The Verge from July 2024 claiming that in the 12 months prior, Bungie had lost 40% of its workforce. I'm just going to leave that hanging here. There was a high point recently though, with the limited time Summer Solstice event being extremely generous with loot, dropping 1 or 2 tiers above normal, so even lower level players could get their hands on tier 5s. However, this event still took place entirely within the portal, running exactly the same activities as we had before, whereas in previous years it had its own bespoke activity, drawing attention even more to the general lack of content. Plus, when it ended, we were straight back to the same long, slow, heavily criticised grind we had before. And with all these new weapons, armour sets and combinations, and no additional space to store them provided with this expansion, players' vaults are bursting at the seams. The desire to chase new loot is in a constant tug of war with our ability to even hold it. Don't get me wrong, there are players who still enjoy the game. I'm still farming gear and plan on taking part in the Epic raid, and my clan leader is having a great time playing a range of activities and just hit 450 power while I was writing this, without subjecting himself to the endless solo ops farm many others have done, and thinks players are generally complaining too much and want everything handed to them on a plate. And there's definitely some truth in that. Many other looter games or MMOs have very long grinds and frequent resets, making old gear redundant, and it seems the creative direction of Edge of Fate has taken significant inspiration from those games. However, I'd point out that there's a reason we are not already playing those other games, and we played Destiny 2 instead of them. I've been an active player for the last 11 years, and have rarely taken a break from the game longer than a few weeks, but now that the substantial majority of my playtime is spent grinding for power level and farming high tier loot, I'm wondering when I'll even have the time to use that loot actually playing the game in fun new activities, especially when there are fewer and fewer of those activities being added to the game over time. On that note though, Ash and Iron, a mid-expansion update containing the reprised Plaguelands location from Destiny 1, a brand new exotic mission and weapon, and a new activity, launches soon. And while editing this video, Bungie released a This Week in Destiny article outlining some upcoming patch notes, with improvements to some of the issues I mentioned earlier. For the upper power leveling bracket, regular loot drops will now be +1 instead of +0, which should speed that final stretch up significantly, and this really should have been how it worked from the start. Conquests will become repeatable. Again, this is a no-brainer given they were supposed to be the replacement for Grandmaster Nightfalls. And new or featured gear will cap out at 5% bonus damage on weapons and 10% DR on armour, which is less of a bonus over our old gear than it was, but alongside the seasonal mods, still makes new or featured gear a priority to equip over any of the older items in our collections, so doesn't really address the new gear problem. The best change though is that when Renegades launches, any new gear from Edge of Fate will remain classed as new gear, instead of being left behind alongside the rest of our collections as previously planned. This is a welcome change, but in my opinion doesn't go far enough to address concerns around the viability of our legacy items, which are all still just worse than equivalent new gear now. Sunsetting 2.0 might have had its expiry dates stretched out a bit, but for now it's still here to stay, and many players already walked away from the game when Edge of Fate first launched in large part because of the seasonal resets. So is this small change going to be enough to bring them back? I honestly don't know if it is. I don't envy the challenge Bungie faces in addressing these issues, but they did design them like that in the first place. And currently my experience playing the game is so off balance, if more significant changes aren't made soon, I just don't picture myself sitting on the scales for that much longer. I love Destiny 2, and I miss it so much, even though I'm playing it right now.